Hello viewers, I am ReaverJolt and welcome to another video. Today, we are talking about why I do not use meta sets. Now before we get started, I quickly want to mention that there's nothing wrong with the meta, and anything that I say in this video is purely from my perspective and opinion. So anything I say in this video in regards to the meta, just please take it all with a grain of salt, because I know that the fanbase as a whole is really divided about this. So I want to come clean as to why I don't use meta sets, and at the same time clarify a few things so that you guys understand where I'm coming from. So with all that out of the way, let's get into the video. So to start, I want to say that I did use meta sets a long time ago, around the time that the base version of Monster Hunter World came out. Well, more like as soon as I reached the end game. Now the reason I did this is because it was my first time getting into mixed set building, and because I wanted to experiment with the stuff myself. And through all of the research that I have done at the time, I did start getting into the meta. But not completely. You see, whenever I make my own mix sets, I try to be more creative. I make sets based on my own playstyle. The one thing I'm not a fan of is doing what's called net set building. In case you guys don't know what I mean by that, you look up an armor set online, on the internet, and you try to copy that exact set in the game you're playing. Net set building is a term that I came up with as a result of net decking, which is basically the same thing but with meta decks for card games like Yu-Gi-Oh!, the Pokemon TCG, Magic the Gathering, etc. That's not really the point here, but you get the idea. Now that I've told you that I sorta used meta sets back then, kinda, not really, to me it's more that I try to be creative with my set building. Now before I talk about the reason I don't use meta sets, I have to go over what the word meta actually means, because a lot of people have gotten this confused. A lot of players tend to think that meta means popular, powerful, or gimmicky, when that's not really the case. The word meta is actually an acronym that stands for Most Effective Tactics Available. Most of you might already know this, but trust me, there's a lot of people that don't know the definition of meta. And it's not just defined in that way either with that acronym. In gaming, it's defined as a means to an end, an effective way to achieve a goal in the game, whether it's beating other players or beating the game itself. Or in Monster Hunter's case, making your life easy by using comfortable sets, as well as speedrunning. Now let's go over the reason why I don't use meta sets, at least a lot of the ones that are popular. It all sort of started when I was getting into a card game called Yu-Gi-Oh! My brother and I and a few friends would get some decks and duel each other. As we got used to the card game, we started to learn more about these more powerful decks, aka the meta decks. These decks had plenty of ways to counter just about 90% of the decks that were out there that weren't really viable. Later on, we would then take our Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks and start participating in actual tournaments. You know, in-person tournaments where you would duel the other person in person. When we participated in these matches, we noticed a bunch of players who were using a lot of these decks that were seemingly unstoppable. There wasn't really a whole lot of creativity from what I was seeing. It was a lot of decks that were pretty much the same and used by a lot of people. Hence why the decks they were using were meta decks. Now when I actually played against some people, a lot of what I noticed was straight faces, not really emotions showing or anything, not even jumping for joy when anyone would win. There was hardly much sportsmanship involved, with a few small exceptions with some players that I played against. Some would shake my hand, but other times, most other players that I would play against wouldn't shake my hand at all after a match. But for the most part, what I was seeing in all these matches was that no one was really having fun at all. It was just mostly the winning attitude, for the most part, at least from my understanding. Whether it was a person getting salty, keeping a straight face, or just being a sore winner. Now, of course, there were exceptions. Now, when I would play with people online with this app called YGO Pro, I would play against randoms, and a lot of what I would get are people who quit after I use a certain card, straight up insult what I would use and say that it's bad, and the occasional person who would straight up insult me right before winning the match. Now, of course, when I would get into other games that weren't card games, I would still notice the same trend with certain titles, like Ark Survival Evolved PvP being one of them, Overwatch, Warframe, League of Legends, and the like. Now, back when I was playing Monster Hunter Tri, I never even heard of the term meta. It wasn't until I got into Yu-Gi-Oh! That I heard that term, and I started hearing that term being thrown around more with other games, like League of Legends for example. And I've never really seen the trend being thrown around until Monster Hunter World, because back then, I would only play solo or online with randoms, or with my brother and friends. So all of the experiences with the meta that I had with Yu-Gi-Oh! kinda came back to haunt me in Monster Hunter World. My experience with the meta hasn't been really great due to the toxicity that is seemingly associated with it. Now again, just like I said, the meta is not toxic, it just has to do with the people that are involved. The people that seemingly add the bad behavior as well as pressuring others to get involved in the meta. And not to mention those who have the elitist attitudes as well. And unfortunately, as a result of toxicity like this, many players who just want to play the game the way they want on their own terms wind up discouraged and sometimes even quit being a part of the community entirely and even stop playing the game. So the point is, the reason why I don't use meta sets in Monster Hunter is because of the toxicity that I had to deal with in the past 3 years. And once again, the meta does not have to do with toxicity, bad behavior, or insults or elitism. There's absolutely nothing wrong with optimizing your builds or whatever it is in any other game. And there's certainly nothing wrong with using what someone else is using. It's the toxicity, elitism, bad behavior, and the constant bickering that is the problem. I might have said this before in some previous meta problem videos that I've done, and I never like making these types of videos because there's always going to be that controversy that's involved with the meta. But this is something I had to get out of my chest so that you guys know where I'm coming from. Now I know there's going to be a lot of comments that disagree with my viewpoint, but that's okay. You don't have to agree with me. Monster Hunter is a franchise that we love, and it's perfectly fine to have our differences. And with that, thank you very much for watching. I hope I never have to do another video like this again, but this is something I just had to get out of my chest. Be kind to one another, and have a most wonderful day. Please.